I made decisions that impacted and hurt my children. I made decisions that were brash and not considering anybody else. That is a destructive way of living. Your life is not purely about you. What's up, everybody? What is going on? This is Cesar Hernandez, aka Coach C, and welcome to the Values Nation podcast, episode 1. Super excited to be here. I wanted to make this podcast and to put this thing together because I feel like at this point of time in our country, in our world, really, we're dealing with a whole lot of things that I think that are destructive to where it is that we would like to be as a nation, in our families, and just as people, period. So, in this show, what we're going to do is we're going to explore life lessons, values, building the next generation through interesting conversations with people that have values. And I'm going to bring on some friends. I'm going to talk to you myself. We're just going to have a lot of good back and forth with each other to really kind of bring this thing together and to see if we might be able to solve some problems along the way. So, before we get started, the one thing I want to make sure to say and to put out there is that this is never meant to be from a standpoint of judgment. This show is never meant to be something where I want you to feel like I'm just casting judgment on what it is that you're doing in your home or what it is that you're doing as a person. This is more of, listen, I was a screw up for a very long time. I grew up in a home that just didn't cultivate the things that I needed to be a productive human being. And so through a lot of hard lessons, I have come away from that and I have put together the person that I am today. And that's what I want to invite you to do, is to take all the lessons that we are going to have on this show and to be able to utilize them for what it is that you're trying to achieve in your life. So let's get into kind of the backstory of where it is that I come from. I come from a small little city in California called Guadalupe. Most people can't pronounce that, but it's called Guadalupe. And it's a small little city. I think the population now is maybe about 10,000 people. I mean, we're talking very, very small. And I grew up in this small little city. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, we moved from another city to that city, and that's as far back as I could remember. And the reason we moved there was because my mom was trying to get away from certain things that were associated with my dad and some other people that were hanging around. And so we ended up in the back of a church, in a back of a Sunday school room. And that was our first home. That was our first house that I could remember. Now, keep in mind that this was a very small city, very small church, very small room. And we're talking about dirt poor, living off of food stamps, living off of any sort of dollars that we can scrunch together, any sort of loose change that we can put together. Really, that's exactly how our setup was. We had rats running around the back room. We had no heat in those back rooms. So it was very, very cold during the wintertime, if you could believe that in California, but very, very cold. And I remember as a child being behind these Sunday school rooms and living there. And on Sundays, we'd have to make sure that we stayed in the room so that we didn't disrupt the actual Sunday school classes that were going on. My mom put us into the church, and we had to go to church about 3 times a week, Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. And those were our 3 days that we were going to church constantly. So as a young child, I remember being in kindergarten, and there was a lot of disconnect between myself and my mom because you got to remember, my mom is raising all these kids by herself. When we moved into this house, my mom had 5 children, and I was number 4. And because there were so many of us in this small little room, my mom just had to try to feed us and to keep us alive and to struggle to try to just do the simple things. And so as we begin our journey in that small little city, I remember the pastor pitching in. I remember people that were around the church coming around a lot of the times and trying to see if we were doing okay. I quickly realized that we weren't like regular kids. We didn't have a lot of things. We didn't have a whole lot of things to our name. I would go to school and I would see kids that had more than I did. They had better clothes than I did. My shoes were torn and, they were barely put together. My clothes, they weren't really the best washed or, the fanciest clothes. I didn't really have that much. And my mom was just trying to do everything she could to make sure that we just survived from day to day and week to week. And that was my environment growing up. Well, at a certain point, we moved from that place to the projects. We started to live in the projects in that city. And again, living on government food stamps and all of these sort of things. And at a certain point, my mom decided that she was going to leave the church and we weren't going to be participating in the church anymore. And because of that, it kind of threw kind of a fork in the road for me where I had to figure out who am I going to be? And this is around sixth or seventh grade where peer pressure starting to come in. And I started to kind of scratch my head and say, okay, I don't know what to do if I don't have that structure around me. If I don't have the Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays to go to, what am I doing with my time? And my mom was working and putting in so many hours in, I didn't really have a whole lot to do with my time. And because my mom was putting in so many hours, I didn't have a whole lot of structure around me anymore. So now you're talking about a kid who is sitting at home, scratching his head like, what do I do? I'm bored. My mom doesn't want to go to church anymore. She's working a ton of hours just to support us. That's where trouble started to come in. And as I begin to go through that journey of trying to discover A, who I was, and B, what do I do with my time, I just destroyed it all. Like I literally destroyed it all. And I started to get involved with things that I shouldn't have been getting involved with. I started to smoke cigarettes. I started to go and experiment with smoking weed, experiment with drinking alcohol. My brother, as a teenager, he was heavy into partying. He right away, thought, hey, we got freedom. Let's go and let's just do everything. And so as I was a small kid in sixth and seventh grade, I'm watching my older brother drink and party and do these things. And I'm watching people in the room having sex. And I'm watching all of these just foreign things to me happening like almost overnight. It's almost like when you've been under constraints for so long and you think that now you have freedom, you're just going to go do everything. And we just had total freedom. And I took advantage of that freedom. I took advantage of every point of that freedom. I just said, I'm just going to go out here and I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to hang with whoever it is that I want to hang with. And I'm just going to go out here and just live my life. Kind of sounds familiar, right? Kind of sounds like what we're faced today with, where everybody just wants to do what they want to do and they don't want you to tell them otherwise. They will tell you to live your best life, right? That's one of the sayings that culture has really brought into the forefront of live your best life. Nobody can tell you anything. You don't need any boundaries. You can just go and do whatever it is that you want. And I'm telling you right now, take a note on that piece of it because later on we're going to discover how destructive that really is. And so as a teenager, as I started to get in more and more trouble, as I started to go out there and do everything without the boundaries, at a certain point, my mom got tired of it. And she ended up signing me away and sending me to live in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, let's take a pause there for a second. This is back in the day where parents were bold enough to actually say, okay, you don't want to follow my rules. You don't want to do what I am asking you to do. Then you're going to go live in a completely different state. We'll see you later. That's exactly what happened. I was at the point where I was partying and I had a girlfriend at that point. And because I had this girlfriend, I'm running around. I have no rules. I get to a point where this girl comes back and tells me that she's pregnant. Now, I want you to remember this piece of the story because it's so important later on. So she tells me that she's pregnant and I take her to the doctor. I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I'm just going to take her to the doctor and let's see what's going on. And so I took her to the doctor without telling my mom. And I went over and we started to do the ultrasound and do everything that we needed to do. The doctor is checking her out, just seeing what's going on. And the crazy part was that the doctor kind of pulled me aside and pulled me out to the hallway. I don't know if I've ever seen a doctor do this before, but I think that it was such a pivotal thing in my life. I just remember it very clearly the way that it happened. He pulled me out to the hallway and he said, "Hey, Caesar, how long have you been with this girl?" And I said, "Well, I've maybe a few weeks at the most." And he says, "Well, she's 2 months pregnant. And if you've only been with her for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I'm sorry to tell you, but this is not your kid." Now, let me tell you something. There was two things that were going on at that point in my mind. Number one, I was like, man, my girl's like pregnant by somebody else. That kind of sucks. And number two was like, my girl's pregnant with somebody else's kid. I'm out of here. Like, it was conflicting feelings like, what do I do here? Now, I want you to remember that part of the story when I come back to it later because it's very, very important. And so at that point, that's when my mom decided that she wanted to kick me out and to send me to live to Indianapolis. So I just want to give a little backstory and context to that. So here I am now in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm sitting there in Indiana as a kid wondering, what do I do next? Now, to frame up what was going on during that time, I was living in a little city called Fishers, Indiana. I don't know if you know much about Indiana, but it's not exactly known for being welcoming to people of color. Let's just put it that way. And I walked in as a bald Mexican kid wearing Pendletons from California, looking like a thug that just walked out of Cali. That was my introduction to the Indianapolis people. I got a job at a little marketplace. It was called Mars Supermarket. And my manager, Douglas Cooney, who I'll never forget, gave me a job and said, "Listen, Caesar, as long as you show up, as long as you continue to work well, you're going to be just fine. As long as you continue to do what you have to do and you show up and you clock in on time and you leave on time, you're not going to have any issues here." And so I said, okay, cool. That's what I'm going to do. Now, you have to remember, I'm out in Indianapolis on my own. My mom has now signed me over to my older brother, who was a lot more responsible than I was at the time. He was a manager of one of the other Mars supermarkets. And so I'm living basically on my own with no rules. My brother not really wanted to implement any sort of discipline or anything like that. So here I am again in Indianapolis, no mom, no dad, no rules. No rules whatsoever. I think I need to backtrack a little bit and just insert in here that I was fatherless as well. So during the time that my mom's raising us in the projects and in the homes that we had there in California, my dad wasn't around. As a matter of fact, we had about 4 dads in our family. So I was raised with a whole bunch of half brothers and sisters. We don't consider it that. We're brothers and sisters. That's what we do. However, we had multiple dads who were in the family. Now back to Indianapolis. While I'm out in Indianapolis, I have no dad. I have no mom. I have no real structure around me. And I just continue to work and I'm being productive. But at the same time, during the evenings when I'm getting off, I'm going and I am now going and partying. And I am getting into a whole bunch of stuff that I shouldn't be getting into. Starting to smoke more weed at this time, experiment a little bit with cocaine, drinking moonshine because that was the thing out in Indianapolis, doing all these sort of things and just running myself into the ground. And I want to pause real quick and talk about the lessons that I wanted to extract from that particular part of the story. You see, in the backstory, in the first part of this story, I talked about my family and I talked about the trauma and I talked about who it is that were in my family and what we were doing. My brother was partying. My mom had, 4 different baby daddies going on. I had all of these sort of things stacked up against me. We stopped going to church. We got rid of the structure. We got rid of the Sunday, Wednesday, Friday structure of going to church. The lesson that I want you to take from this is that you must understand the past traumas of your life and of your family's life. You must understand the things that are coming after you. Because make no mistake, the mistakes that your parents made, the mistakes that are being made on the daily as you're being raised up are now being injected into your DNA. They're being injected into who it is that you're going to ultimately become. So what did I become? I became somebody who was chasing women, no structure. So I'm just getting out there doing whatever it is that I wanted to do. And I didn't understand that this was an actual cycle that was going on in my life that was already repeated with my father and my mother. I didn't understand that at the time. I thought I was just somebody out here living my best life. I thought I was just out here doing whatever it is that I wanted to do. I was going to do me, right? That's what I was doing. Well, no, the real reality of that was that I was actually just repeating what my parents did. I was just repeating what so many other people that come from those sort of backgrounds do. You know, sometimes we think that we're so unique, especially us kids from the hood. We think we're so unique. We think we got so much swag. We think we got this, we got that, because we're scrappy. We got no money, so we get creative. That's how hip hop was born. That's how all of these different styles that we put together with our Air Force Ones and the way that we clothe ourselves is because it's out of necessity. We have to get creative because we can't afford the expensive clothing. We can't afford the Louis Vuitton. We can't afford these things. And so we get creative and we express ourselves through our clothes and through the way that we walk and we talk and our lingo and the way that we carry ourselves. You have to understand that a lot of that is drawn from trauma. A lot of that is just being scrappy. A lot of that is just coming from a place that is just not good, but we're just managing what we have. And so the lesson that I want you to take from that is that you have to understand your traumas and the habits that are coming after you. You have to understand that if you're not studied up on that, if you don't understand that piece of the puzzle, my friend, you're just going to repeat everything that happened in your mom's life, in your dad's life. You're going to repeat whatever happens in whoever's raising you, whatever environment in which you're in. This is why it's also very, very important to take inventory of the people that you're hanging out with. You see, as a kid, you really don't see people's flaws. You just kind of see people for what you think they are, right? You're hanging with Tony and he's got a terrible habit of cursing so much, but you don't really realize it. You're just like, Tony just cusses a lot. You don't read too much into it. You're just kind of hanging out. But if you had somebody that was there to say, that is not a normal thing. That is not the way in which we speak as a family. That's not how we do things in this home. The structure that is needed to be able to have a kid go through that and go through those types of environments is super important. It's extremely important. And a lot of times, people that come from the places that we come from, the people that come from the hoods that we come from, the people that come from the projects like where I come from, they don't have that structure because they're scraping together whatever they can to just try to get through the day. So they don't have energy to try to put these good values in their homes. At least that's what they think. They think that I don't have the energy. I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to do what I need to do to just survive. So let's move on to the next part of that. So after I moved to Indianapolis, I was out there and again, running around and just being who I wanted to be. Just going out there and just doing what I wanted to do, right? No limitations, no boundaries, none of these things really pertain to me. I'm just out here, I'm going to do what I do. I'm just out here, I am just going to say what I want to say. I'm going to hang with whoever I want to hang with. I'm a party the way that I want to party. Hey, I'm going to work. I'm earning some money. I'm doing my own thing. And because of that mindset and that attitude, what ended up happening is I met a girl. I fell in love. And you'll see that I'm on the video of this. I'm doing the quotations, right? The air quotes. I'm in love with this girl. I fell in love with this girl. And really what it was I was in lust with this girl, but I had nobody around me to tell me, Caesar, that's not really love. You're just at a point where your hormones are just going crazy, man. You need to kick back. You need to chill. I married this girl after 3 months. I want to repeat that one more time. I met a girl. I fell in, quote unquote, love, which was really lust. I had nobody around me to tell me otherwise, and I ended up marrying her. Now, I do want to give a quick shout to my brother-in-law, which was the only one that was around me at the time that had any sort of sense to try to convince me or to coax me out of actually getting married. I'll never forget it. We went to a McDonald's, of all places, right before the wedding, and we were sitting there getting something to eat. And we were waiting for everything. I had to stay away and I couldn't see her. And they were getting ready. We got married in a house. Her parents didn't show up because they were against the wedding. We had all these signs on the wall that we were ignoring, by the way. And so we're sitting there in the McDonald's, and my brother-in-law says, Caesar, you don't have to do this. And I looked at him, and I'm like, no, what are you talking about, man? He says, Caesar, you don't have to do this. And I said, man, I got to do this. Like, I already said I'm going to marry her. I got her the ring. I got the person that's going to marry us. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's too soon, man. Like, you don't know what you're doing. And I'll never forget that conversation because I blatantly ignored the guy. You see, you have somebody here who has experience, somebody here who was a lot older than I was at the time, trying to come in and to tell me that's not the way. And because I was so free and I was so free thinking, I had no structure, I had no accountability up to that point, I couldn't receive it. This was not something that I could receive at that moment. Now, you could chalk it up to being a teenager. I was 18 years old at the time. But I know a lot of kids in my home, my children, and a lot of other kids that have had structure all of their lives and have had the values that we're going to be talking about. And I think they could have made a better audible than I did at that moment. So I don't buy into the fact that it's just because you're young and you're a teen, you can't make a right decision. I think there are many ways to cultivate that in our children today. So as I ignored him, I went and got married. And I ended up marrying this girl out of pure emotional unbalance, out of pure lust, out of pure whatever it was. And what happened in that marriage was what should have happened. I learned my lesson big time. What do I mean by that? Well, within that first year, we have our first child, and things start to get rocky. We start to fight a lot. We both sobered up during that time because when we got married, we said, okay, we're going to sober up and we're not going to party anymore. Note to self, note to you, note to anybody listening. When you're getting ready to get married with somebody, make sure you're not just partying with this person. You're not thinking coherently. As simple as that sounds, you might be sitting there saying, yeah, duh, that's of course, Caesar. But you'd be surprised on how many people are not making clear decisions. Got married with this girl, had our first child. Things started going rocky. Turned around, had a second child. Before I knew it, we couldn't even get along anymore. We had sobered up. We didn't know who each other were. We didn't really like each other. There was something that was it just was off. It wasn't happening. And I remember one day I got in my car. I went to work after a fight. And I said, she just needs to cool off. I'm going to get out of here. And I went over to work. And at the time, I was working third shift. And so I would work overnight. I went in about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, in the evening. And I would get up about 3 or 4 in the morning. And then I would go home and try to get some sleep, try to get some rest. And I remember getting home that next morning, after we had this big blowout fight. And I got into the house and something just seemed off. It just it was quiet as you would expect at 3 or 4 in the morning. I noticed that my furniture was missing. I walked into my kitchen and I noticed that the tables had been cleared out. And I'm looking here like, what is going on? What is happening here? Walk into the bedroom, everything is gone out of the bedroom. There is one small box spring mattress on the floor. My kids were gone. My wife was gone. The house was empty. I said, what is going on here? She had gotten so upset with me. She'd gotten so mad, so infuriated with our conversation. She cleared the house out, took off with the kids, and didn't tell me about it. Now, it's one thing if she took off and she went down the street to go cool off and said, I'm moving out and I'm going to go get my own apartment and screw you, buddy, and I'll see you later. That's one thing. I didn't hear from her or was not able to track her down for 3 months. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. You got 2 kids, 2 babies. You don't hear from them for 3 months. You don't know where they're at. You know their mother is unstable. You know that things are probably not right. And you're freaked out because you don't know the health and the safety of these children. My number one concern was, are they still alive? You see, because as I begin to wake up, as I begin to get a little bit more mature, because I'm going through these fights and I'm starting to like scratch myself on the head and say, oh man, I think you made a bad decision by marrying this girl. I think you both made a bad decision by rushing this thing, having no structure, and then trying to live like you had structure prior to this when you have no practice. Couldn't find my children for 3 months. Nobody heard from them. Her parents, her aunties, her uncles, her brothers, nobody had heard from her. No idea. So I'm sitting in this house for months, depressed, drinking myself into a stupor. And keep in mind, I had already sobered up. But because of a choice that I made, because of a marriage that I ran into, because of the choice of woman that I made, I was now back at square one and try to drink my problems away. That's where I was. I get a phone call one day, and it's from this random woman. And I don't know if you remember this, but back in the day, there was this thing called caller ID. And it was this little box, and we had it on our landline phones. You remember those? We had a landline phone, and there was this little caller ID box that would tell you exactly where the number was coming from, unless they were blocked. And so I received this phone call from a Boise, Idaho phone number. I don't know anybody in Boise, Idaho. I have no idea who would be calling me from there. It must be a telemarketer. So I just kind of let it keep ringing and go to voicemail. They hung up, didn't leave a voicemail, called right back. I said, that's kind of weird. I don't know who that is. I'm just going to let it ring again and just go to voicemail. Nothing. Called back a third time. Third time, I reach over, pick up the phone. I'm a little nervous because I'm like, I don't know who's calling me this many times. I don't know. And there was a voice on the other side of that phone, and it was this woman, random woman I've never met before, never spoke to her, I didn't know whose voice this was or anything. And she asked me, is this Caesar? I said, yeah, this is Caesar. She goes, are your kids named Hennessy and Isaac? Are these your kids? Do you have a wife named Amanda? And at this point, I'm thinking like, man, everything starts flooding through my head. Are they dead? What's going on with them? Where are they? Who's this strange person calling me and asking me about my kids and about my wife? And I said, yeah, who is this? And she says, look, I'm not trying to get in the middle of everything, but I need to tell you that your children are going to be on the streets within 2 days because I'm holding them up in my house. Your wife is here in my home, and I got to kick her out. This particular woman was living on I believe, some sort of Section 8 or something that didn't allow her to have the tenants, extra tenants inside of her apartment. She had to get rid of my kids and had to take, my wife out of her home. And so they were going to be living on the streets, and we're talking in the middle of wintertime, Boise, Idaho, snow, sleet, cold, everything going on at that time. And so I said, listen, I don't know who you are, but are the kids okay? She says they're fine. They're absolutely fine. But I got to tell you, if you have any sense, please come get these kids. And she hung up. No address, no nothing. Well, if you also remember back in the day, we had something called 411. So I picked up the phone and I dialed 411. And I asked the operator to look up an address, to look up a phone number and if I can get an address for that phone number. So I was able to obtain an address. So not more than 8 hours later, I was on a plane flying out to Boise, Idaho, going to find my children. I got on a plane with my mother-in-law at the time, my wife's mother. We got on a plane and we flew out to Idaho. And I told her, look, we have to go. I don't know what's going on with these kids. Something's wrong. I can tell by the tone of the voice of this woman who called me. I don't know who she was. I tracked down an address. Let's go get these kids. We landed in Boise, Idaho. I think it was about 9, 10 o'clock at night. and it's too late for us to go out, and because we don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know if we show up at night, or is there going to be guns? Is there going to be knives? Is this a shady situation? We had looked at the address, and we had some people in Idaho that told us it was kind of a shady neighborhood. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up going to bed that night, waking up first thing in the morning, and headed over to the apartment. We headed over to the apartment, and we knocked on the door. I'll never forget this. There was a little child that opened up the door. And I asked, "Are there babies in this house?" And the little child shook his head yes. And I said, "Mijo," which is like a term of endearment. You know, you're talking to a little boy in Spanish. And I said, "Mijo, I need you to step out of the way." He stepped out of the way. I kicked that door in. I got into the house, to the apartment, and I walked down the hall, and I am on all alert. Like my senses were just, what am I walking into? I was prepared to fight. I was prepared to kill. I was prepared to do whatever it took to get my kids out of there. As I'm walking through the living room and through the hallways and passing the kitchen, and I'm looking around me, and I could very easily tell that this was a crack house. I could tell that these people were on drugs. I could tell that it was a very bad situation. I could tell that this was not a place that I wanted my kids to be in. There was a light on the left-hand side coming out of the door to one of the bedrooms. I turned and I pushed open the door, and there on the floor were my daughter and my son, Hennessy and Isaac, sitting there on the floor, hair looking crazy, not having any sort of indication that they've been taken care of. Their diapers were super filled, like they hadn't been changed for I don't know how long. Mud or chocolate or whatever it was that was spread all over their face from just being filthy and dirty. Sitting there, and as soon as I came to the door, they looked up at me, and they began to smile like if they seen somebody familiar. Upon walking up to them and kissing them on the head and embracing them and trying to figure out what to do in that moment, I was brushing my fingers through their head, and I realized that their heads were full of head lice. Now, these are my children. These are my babies. They were just safe in Indiana a few months ago. We had a nice home. We had everything that they needed. They were very comfortable. I had painted my daughter's room specific colors to make it like a princess. My son had a great place to be. And now here I am looking at my kids not taken care of, in a very terrible position. I scooped up my kids and I started to grab clothes from everywhere that I could. I seen their clothes all over the place. I seen diapers and different things and baby wipes, and I'm starting to get everything into a bag, starting to throw it all. And their mom happened to be in the shower at the time. I didn't know that, but I can hear the shower running, and I didn't see her, so she was in the shower. And I'm just trying to do everything I can along with my mother-in-law to try to get these kids packed up and let's get out of here. My plan was to just take the kids and to leave that house, leave that apartment. She took the kids from me. I'm going to take them from her. That was the plan. Picked up the kids, got everything, started headed down the hallway, getting ready to leave. And boom, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Stay and bring her with you. I want you to understand something. The last thing that I wanted to do was to stay and to bring the person that kidnapped my kids from me. That was the last thing that I wanted to do. Why did I do it? Because it was the right thing to do. Because it was the right thing to do. Take a note on that for a second. You may have people in your life right now that are doing you wrong, that are saying things, that are backstabbing or whatever it is. Do not allow that to get you out of your character. Do not allow that to be the thing that turns you into a person that you don't want to be. So I stopped and I said to my mother-in-law, let's stop right here. Let's sit on the couch, wait for her to get out of the shower. We sat on the couch, We waited for her to get out of the shower. She comes out of the shower, walks into the hallway, still drying her hair, turns around, looks down the hall, and sees us in shock. I mean, it looked like this girl seen a ghost. She was like, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Look, here's the deal. We are taking these kids right now. You can come with us or you can stay here. But either way, the kids are leaving." She knew that she was in a tight position. She knew this was a way out. She ended up taking us up on the offer. We left the apartment, loaded up into the truck, drove her over to her uncle's house who stayed there in Idaho, dropped her off at the house, started to clean up the kids, got treatment for their head, for the head lice that they had, put them on a plane, went back to Indiana. Left her in Idaho because she had caught a case that she needed to hang back for. She wasn't able to leave the state. She never bounced back from that. It has been 20 years since that event took place. She never bounced back from that. My kids were raised without their mother. My kids were raised without the mother side of the equation. They were raised with their father. They were raised with the discipline. They were raised with the masculinity. They were raised with the things that I could provide. And because of that, my kids suffered. Because of that, they didn't have both sides to balance each other out. Because of that, they didn't have the nuclear home that it takes to raise a child. Years of therapy, years of personal development, years of conversations is what we had to do for them to come out, quote unquote, somewhat normal. The reason why I bring this up is because I really want you to understand the lesson that came out of that, the understanding that I got from that was never make long-term decisions on short-term emotions. Because of me finding somebody, lusting after them, and saying they're fine. Let me just do what I do because, hey, we're just going to do this. I made a decision that affected and impacted my children for their entire lives. I made decisions that impacted and hurt my children. I made decisions that were brash and not considering anybody else. I was making a decision for me as opposed to anybody else. This is my life. This is what I'm doing. I don't care about anybody else. I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to live my best life. That is a destructive way of living. And I want you to understand that if you understand that concept, that your life is not purely about you. Am I saying not to take care of yourself? Am I saying not to have self-love? Am I saying not to do that? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you become so selfish and you're only and purely about yourself, your life cannot be fulfilled in the way that you think it's going to be. You will make brash decisions. You will make decisions that are just not cohesive to what you're trying to create in your life. So, moving on. The last piece of this story, which I think will carry on to a second episode, but is that as I started to get into my adulthood, because when I had my kids, I was 18 years old when I started to have them, so I was 21 years old as they're starting, as we pick up from that part of the story. And I'm still young. I'm still dumb. I'm still not understanding the full impact of my decisions. So I'm drinking, and I'm like, I got my kids. I'm responsible, man. I'm going to work. I'm coming home. Yeah, I got money for the kids. I could buy the diapers. I could do this stuff. And I was just kind of living a mediocre life. And I got to tell you, one of the most dangerous things that you could do as a man is to allow yourself to live in a mediocre space, in a mediocre mind space that just says enough is, this is enough. It's just whatever it is. Like, it's cool. Like, it is what it is. That's the worst thing that you can do for yourself. If you are not constantly trying to evolve and grow and to become a better version of yourself and to become stronger for the people that you love, my friend, you're headed down the wrong path. I'm telling you right now. Because what I have learned about raising my children over the last 20 years is that your children will do what you do, not what you say. What do I mean? If you're living out a certain way and you're telling your kids, I do this, but don't do that. I do this, but don't follow my lead on this. Like, you just do what I say. Do what I say, not what I do. That's not going to work. Not with raising children. Not with being the father and the leader and the provider and the protector of your home. That's not what it's going to end up being. You will be very disappointed in the product that comes from that. You want to make sure that as a father, you are showing up every day sharper, more stable-minded, being the pillar that your home needs you to be, being the solid character that you need to be for your children, for your wife, for the people that love you, for your coworkers, for your business, for your contractors, anybody that you're dealing with. You got to be sharp. And you won't be sharp by being mediocre. So at a certain point, after living that mediocre life, I decided one day that I don't want to live like this anymore. For about 7 years, I was struggling with chronic anxiety, depression, and panic attacks. I couldn't even drive a car down to the gas station to pump gas without having a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't walk around the corner to check my mail without having a full-blown panic attack. What was going on? I was eating like crap. I was sleeping like crap. I was thinking like crap. I was hanging out with a bunch of people that were just talking like crap. I wasn't progressing at all in my life. And so at a certain point, I decided, okay, I'm going to change all of that. I quit my job. I stayed home. My wife continued to work. I was married at the time. It's my second marriage. We'll go into that in another episode. These are all lessons that I learned along the way. I was in a second marriage now, which, by the way, I rushed into that one too. Didn't learn the lesson yet. Second marriage, wife staying at home. And I was adamant about making sure that I changed my life. I ended up losing 75 pounds in a span of about 3 or 4 months. Did P90X, Insanity, these at-home workout programs. You'll probably want to remember that later on because what happened years after that is pretty wild. I ended up getting myself in shape, figuring out I don't want to work for somebody. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to build a business. And I went out and I built multiple 6-figure businesses because I had more clarity. I had more structure. I was watching what I was eating. I was working out. I was doing all these things that just made me feel better. It's funny what happens when you start to do good things for yourself and for your family and good things happen. It's weird how that works, right? Where you stop making rash decisions. You stop making selfish decisions. You stop only thinking about yourself. You start taking care of yourself. You start understanding that, no, this is important. You got to get some sleep. No, this is important. You got to watch what you're putting in your pie hole. This is important. You start getting clarity. And because you're starting to get clarity, you start to make better decisions. When you make better decisions, you have a better life. Isn't that crazy how that works? It's wild. The lesson that I learned from that was that you have the ability to change things in a blink of an eye. You have the ability to change things in your life in a blink of an eye. You see, I woke up one day, I was tired of having panic attacks. I was tired of having anxiety. I'd be driving my car and my family was feeling on edge because they knew that I dealt with this. I would have to pull over so many times to prevent myself from wrecking my car and killing my family. Not that I was trying to intentionally kill my family, because I was just having a panic attack. I was trying to make the pain go away. I was trying to make the panic go away. Started taking pills to deal with it. So as I improved my life, as I took myself out of that, as I worked my way through that, and I improved, I made that decision one morning after waking up. I made that decision, and that was it. My whole life was changed. Imagine what that feels like. Losing 75 pounds, becoming a completely different human being, feeling better than you ever have before, feeling stronger than you ever have before, feeling lighter on your toes than you ever have before. And now you're demonstrating to your kids something that can be done. Remember what I said about your kids will do what you do, not what you say. My sons are athletes now, in the gym all the time, working out, watching what they're eating, taking these same things that they've seen their dad do and applying them in their own life. So you can change your mind in a blink of an eye. Now, I'm not saying that you can change everything overnight, like everything is just going to change just like that. What I'm saying is you can make a decision in the blink of an eye. That's the better way of putting it. You can make a decision that will change your life in the blink of an eye. Pivot and grow through your pain. Pivot and grow through your pain. To kind of put a cap on this episode, I ended up going and building multiple 6 and 7-figure businesses. I built up a gym and ran that for a while, shut that thing down, ended up going and building another multiple 6-figure business, built up multiple 7-figure businesses for my clients in the marketing realm, worked with people like Eric Thomas, the motivational speaker, Tony Horton, the creator of P90X, so many people that I've come across and that are giants in their industries rely on me to help them to take their marketing to another level. Now, how is it that a kid from the hood that went through everything that I just described, made all the bad choices that he made, was able to get to a point where people that are the leader of their industries are relying on me to help them grow their businesses? There is a choice that you must make at a certain point that your life no longer is acceptable. In the context of what you're doing, of who you're hanging with, and the way that you speak, the way that you carry yourself, the things that you eat, the places that you go, the music that you listen to, the podcasts that you listen to, there needs to be a self-audit. Are you bringing the values that you need to bring to the table? Because it's those same values that will guide you and that will become now non-negotiable in your life, that will help you raise your kids, raise amazing kids, raise yourself up, get yourself to a better position financially, get yourself to a place where you're feeling amazing about life now, and you're no longer just sitting in depression all day because you got no purpose. My friend, what are you doing today that will change your life tomorrow? Are you willing to do the things today that most people aren't willing to do to have a better tomorrow? Are you willing to show up in a way that most people won't? Are you willing to talk a certain way? Are you willing to change the way that you talk? You think this is the way that I was talking in the hood? What is wrong with learning how to articulate your words better? You see, people from the hood, we look down on people from the hood when they start to move on up because, they just think they're better than us. That's not the case. The fact of the matter is that when you improve yourself, you can't talk the same way. You can't walk the same way. You can't hang the same way. I'll never forget, there was a point in time where I stopped hanging with a particular group of friends, and we used to drink and smoke together all the time in the garage, and that was the thing. And I had the kids, and here I am, like, just being irresponsible with my time. I never showed my kids that. I never drank around my kids. I never smoked around my kids like that, not to the extent that I was there. But I knew that I wasn't being productive with my time. I knew that this was not the place that I needed to be. And when I walked away from that particular group of friends, they were mad at me because all of a sudden I was just this other dude. I was wanting to change. I was better than what I was the day before, and they took it as I'm trying to be better than them. Don't be afraid to grow. Don't be afraid to do the things that you have to do and get away from the places and the people that you need to be able to get to the places that you need to go. We got one shot at this life. One. That's it. I don't know if you know this, but there's a great saying that I love to reference. You can't get out of life alive. I'm going to say that one more time, just in case you missed it. You can't get out of life alive. And if you realize that, if you take that in, if you allow that to be the sobering thought that guides your life, you will come to the table with all the values. You will do all the things that you need to. You will go to the places you need to go to. You will get up and work towards the goals that you want to work towards. You will start to treat yourself better. You start to treat your kids better. Start to have better in-depth conversations with your kids about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, the mistakes that you made. And all of these things will culminate as the person and the life that you want to build. Hey, this is Coach C over here. And I just want to let you know, thank you so much for watching this first episode. Thank you so much for tuning into the Values Nation podcast. I really hope that this platform will turn into something where we have conversations that are hard, conversations that most people won't have, conversations that we just need to, because some of the traumas and the things that are deep down inside need to be shaken up, need to be removed, need to be taken to a whole nother level in our lives to be able to see the world that we want to see on the outside. We'll see you soon.